and they're just thinking, what's the quickest thing I can give this person to just get them the answer, get them off my back, and move them on so I can, kind of selfishly just get back to what I want to work on. Ever been responsible for mentoring or leading someone on a software project, and no matter what you do, it doesn't seem like they're getting any better? No matter how much you teach them, it seems like they always just keep coming back to you for the same trivial things. I made the same exact mistake when I first started leading software projects over 20 years ago. I thought if I passed on all the knowledge I had about the software project to everybody else, I'd get bothered less and everyone else would get work done faster. In this episode, I want to share how coaching and consulting have taught me that there's a much better way to lead people and mentor them than just giving them the answer and the information they need to solve the problem. So let's talk about how you can bring out the best in the software teams that you're working on by leading differently. So first, let's just talk about how does solving problems for people really hold them back? Well, the main thing that I've experienced is when you're trying to lead or mentor other people and you solve the problem for them, it really creates a dependency on you. If every time that somebody needs to move forward and they get stuck, they feel frustrated, they don't know what to do, their first instinct is to reach out to whoever has the information. And hey, there's reasons to do that. I'm going to get into that as the episode goes on. But if that's like the default, it just creates a dependence where that person doesn't feel empowered and you feel overburdened. If you've ever been, let's say a senior engineer mentoring a junior engineer, product owner mentoring associate product owners, you're Scrum Master, and there's a new Scrum Master who's joined the team. Any kind of management position where there's a newer manager or somebody that you're managing. The temptation can be to, bark orders and get them to move forward and give them the instant information. And a lot of that is just that in corporate culture, we all feel this urgency and this pressure to just say that we're done with things. But if you really want people to grow and you want to not feel like you have so much stress if you are leading other people, you really have to empower them to be able to solve the problems without you. And unfortunately, the only way to do that is to let people struggle. When I've been on software projects and they've been going really bad, I often feel very tempted internally to just jump in and start, solve a problem here, solve a problem there, pitch in here, pitch in there. But when you do that, you don't force other people to struggle and have to solve the problem themselves and honestly do their job. You're really kind of doing other people's job for them. Now, for example, if somebody needs like the password to a cloud service account, or they need, some other administrative function to be performed that you literally only are the person in the company, let's say, that has the permission, security permissions, or the capability to do it, something like that, sure, of course you're going to do that to help them. Or like, if they don't have a relationship with another person and you can't introduce them, you have to, communicate something to someone else, like a higher up. Might you have to do that? Sure. But there's more cases than I realized when I'm leading people where I can give them the answer. I can tell them what to do, but that's not actually serving them. And it's also not serving me in the long run. And I'm going to talk about the short-term versus long-term impact of how we lead people and answer questions or don't as this episode goes on. So next, let's just talk about the role of resourceful questions. This is something that I do all the time in my professional career coaching now. And I started doing this more about halfway into my career when I learned where I was making a lot of mistakes with leadership. When you're leading another person, let's say, again, you're a senior engineer and you're leading or just showing a junior developer how to do something, or you're, a UX designer and you're showing a graphic artist how to do something. If you've got more experience than them, the temptation, or even just more years at the company, the temptation can be to look at the other person as less than you. I have more knowledge, they have less knowledge, therefore I'm in a position of, I'm better equipped to solve this problem. And this is a real mistake and problem that I see even at the executive levels of companies that I've worked with. The better way to look at this is that somebody who you're leading or you're mentoring, they're a resourceful person. They're intelligent, they're smart. They may not have the same knowledge as you, but they have the same potential to acquire the knowledge. They have the same potential to acquire the experience that you have. If you think back to when you didn't have much experience, you had potential though. Somebody had to have recognized that potential to give you a shot or invest in you. And, if you think back to times you've had great managers, they probably didn't solve everything for you or belittle you or make you feel like you were less than them. So the beginning of this starts really with an attitude towards whoever you're leading, looking at them as this is a whole person. They don't need anything. They're not missing anything. There might be knowledge that they don't have. There might be experiences they haven't had, but really looking at them potentially as they can be empowered to be awesome at their job. Even if today maybe they're struggling, that doesn't mean they can't be at a better place than they are now. Now, the challenge is when they come to you needing help, how do you help that person solve the problem without giving them the answer? And the way that, I do this, and any great leader I've worked with does this, is by asking powerful questions. These are questions that really get the person you're leading to dig deeper into their own resources, to try to find new options, new solutions that they may not have ever considered. And what I'm saying is not leading them like saying, well, what if you use this other pattern that you give them? It'd be more like something like, are there any patterns that you haven't considered? One of the common things that when I would lead people, developers would often struggle with is they're trying to come up to speed on a new code base, right? There's all this documentation that I've tried to do, that other team members have tried to do. Same thing if you're, let's say, in product management. You might have a lot of resources available for people on your team to understand customer problems, the market, existing releases of the software, feedback that you've received, legal compliance issues. But ultimately, they can't answer every possible question that someone who's working with you might have. And so these resourceful questions, really the goal of them is to help the person see that they're capable of solving the problem and getting the answer themselves. But they might have to broaden the scope of how they've looked at it. So really what you're doing is you're trying to get them to think bigger. And this is one of those things that as a coach, again, when I work with clients, I'll often have them ask me a question that I could give them an answer. I have to be careful though, because it might be my answer, which is like how I would go about it. And when you're coaching someone, especially on their career, I don't want to give people answers that tells them what they should do based on what I've done. I can give them insights to things that I've done that have worked for me, but they're also totally contextual. I've talked about this in a lot of other episodes, that in the tech industry specifically, I think we have too much confidence in our own perspective, and we aren't honest. At least I can say this for myself. We aren't honest enough about how much our unique situation, our experience, our context colored the reason why we chose the thing we're telling them in the first place. But ultimately, the reason why you ask these resourceful questions is it's going to lessen the load on you as a leader. If you don't have to constantly be asked all the time when there's a problem, then people are going to be more autonomous. A lot of engineers, for example, say, I wish I was on a team that was more autonomous. Well, if your leadership, the way that they lead is always by telling you what to do and, giving you answers just to move you forward, and they don't challenge you with powerful questions, coaching type questions, then there's a reason why they probably don't trust you with autonomy. They may not have had experience with leading in a more coaching type of way, or they just have never had, somebody else model it for them. And then the other thing asking these resourceful questions really does is it helps the person you're leading take ownership. This is one of those terms we hear all the time on software projects or just in corporate culture. I hope you're taking ownership, and well, you need to take ownership. And I want to hire someone who takes ownership. Well, if you want people to take ownership, then you can't just answer their question and drive them away because you're too busy every time you're leading them. Some of the worst, let's say tech leads, for example, that I've worked with in my career, somebody comes to them with a problem, and they're just thinking, what's the quickest thing I can give this person to just get them the answer, get them off my back, and move them on so I can, kind of selfishly just get back to what I want to work on. And, I made a whole episode about how I believe that tech leads should be more of leaders than technicians. And that's an unpopular view, but, you can go back and listen to or watch that one if you're curious on my perspective there. But, a good leader in that situation should stop what they're doing. Even if you're a tech lead or you're, a scrum master who's leading someone, and start asking powerful, resourceful questions to help that person broaden the view of the options they have, the things they could do, the resources they could use to answer the question themselves, including next time. And some examples of questions I've used that really help people in these kind of situations is someone will come to me with a problem and they're feeling overwhelmed, like it's too big. And I'll ask them, well, have you thought of breaking this down into smaller pieces? How could you break this problem up so you don't have to solve the whole thing right now? What if you only had to solve just one little piece? And once you've solved that, you can go to the next one. Now, I can hear the objections already. Well, what if you get, 3 out of 5 steps in and you realize that because you didn't do the other last ones, your design doesn't work? That can happen, but I'll tell you, it's a lot easier to help someone approach a refactoring than it is to just watch someone struggle and thrash and not make any progress. I've had many times in my career where I've just had to take action and take a step and do something without clear visibility into what the eventual whole thing is going to be, because otherwise I just get stuck in analysis paralysis. And obviously this is a judgment call. It's a little bit tough. And then the other one, I talked about this earlier, is have you really considered all your options? Like, you might feel confident that you did some research, you looked at some Reddit posts, you talked to some other managers, and you know what your options are. But is that really true? Challenging people when they like to say, I've exhausted every possibility, or I've tried every option, or I've done everything I can. That can be true, but I think a lot of times, at least in my experience when I'm leading people, that kind of an answer comes about when somebody's just frustrated and they're feeling overwhelmed. And again, out of a concern to just move the project forward, the temptation is to just give them an answer, get them moving. But if you really want to develop resourceful people who you can lead and they can basically be more autonomous, you got to calm them down, acknowledge that they're overwhelmed. I do this again a lot in my coaching. I have to get people to admit the feeling they're experiencing first. If I don't help them to acknowledge that, they're frustrated, they're angry, they're overwhelmed, whatever it is, then, logic and all the plans I can give them is going to go nowhere, because they need to acknowledge and just let themselves feel the feeling first. But once they do, that's where I can start to help them really look at, have you really exhausted all the options? Let's step back a little bit. Let me give you some suggestions about how you can go about finding this out yourself. Maybe give them some other sources they haven't went to, but again, don't give them the direct answer. And the biggest thing is just to ask someone, well, how would you solve this if I wasn't available? Now, you got to be careful how you ask this. And I think you have to have an existing relationship with the person where they know you're asking this not to pass the buck, so to speak, or because you don't care. You're asking them this because you want to help them grow in their autonomy and ownership. So, when you ask someone, hey, you could even tell them, hey, I could give you the answer. I could. But I'm trying to help you grow and really feel that you can own and do this yourself. I believe in you. I see more in you than what you're doing right now. Think about if I wasn't here, if you had to figure this out and just talking to me was not an option, what's the approach you'd take? Where would you go? What would you do? And as soon as they start, having to think about a future where you're not available, it again forces them to draw upon their own resourcefulness and come up with the answer themselves. So let's talk about how shifting from the view of being an expert, which is super popular in our industry, to more of a coach really helps your team. I mean, it's super common that if you're like a tech lead, for example, there's this pressure and expectation. You'll see it on LinkedIn. You'll see it in YouTube videos other than mine. You'll see them all over the place that if you're a technical leader, staff engineer, tech lead, team lead, any of these positions, you need to have all the answers. And, upper management, your boss, if they're not good at, again, coaching and leading you, they may have that kind of expectation. But if you know better and you're listening to what I'm trying to share with you today, I want to give you some peace to just know that you can be really effective at technically leading people without all the answers. I did a whole episode on, leading developers better by letting go about 2 or 3 years ago. I'll put a link somewhere where you can watch that or listen to it. But, if you are leading 5, 6, 10, 30 different people, and you think you can keep all the answers in your head, you're going to be a mess. And you're also just creating dependence on everyone on you. So, lean into that part of you that knows I got to make decisions on this team that are going to help it be self-sufficient, not dependent on me. The other thing is, if you lead people through coaching, it provides some really cool benefits in that it lets the people you're leading spend more of their time focusing on what they're trying to become experts at. If you're leading a senior engineer and you're a tech lead or something, and your senior engineer is constantly having to come to you for questions and be on Slack or be in meetings and you're just constantly asking and spending more of their time discussing than, researching and prototyping and refactoring and coding and, doing all the things that they can do to become more resourceful, they're not getting to spend as much time at developing expertise around what you need them to be experts at. And on the flip side, you as a leader, your biggest value is not answering trivial questions. And, it might feel good to feel really powerful, like I have all the answers, but that's just that's kind of a delusion that strokes your ego, but it doesn't actually make you as effective. If you're an architect, let's say, the thing that you're best at is being able to look at an overall solution and all the trade-offs and all the complexities and make really, hopefully, pretty wise decisions about, technology selection and pattern usage and, things that are appropriate for the staff and the strategy of the company. The individual senior engineers or junior engineers, though they could help with that. And, some companies don't have a formal architect role and every place is different, but, you're kind of putting the burden on them to do stuff that's your sort of secret sauce if you're in a higher level technical leadership position. So if you really want to get to spend more time doing technical leadership type of activities, leading people, making decisions, introducing cool patterns and strategies, basically strategic type work versus tactical. And then you want to help the people who their whole job is to be awesome at programming or UX or project management or whatever it is. Let them spend more of their time doing that. The way you can do that is just, again, resist this temptation to give people the answer and ask them difficult but resourceful questions that force them to take ownership and figure it out themselves with your guidance. And a perfect example of this, and I'll be really real with you here and honest, is, if you know my background, I developed software in a variety of positions as an employee for about half my career. Then the second half of my career, I got into consulting and I started doing, tons of consulting engagements all over town, architecture consulting, management consulting, mobile consulting, DevOps consulting, all that kind of stuff. And then I became a career coach about 5 years ago. And I still do some consulting part-time, but this is mostly what I'm focused on. And honestly, that first year when I started coaching people, even though I knew a lot of what I'm teaching you today, I still would fall back into giving people the answer. And I think it was partially, I was so used to that corporate pressure to just give people the answer, keep them moving along, give people the answer, keep them moving along. And when you're coaching, one thing that's very important to know, and this is true even if you're coaching on the job, again, you're in a technical leadership position, it's not what happens in the conversation that really changes the person or empowers them or helps them to transform into the best version of whatever they're attempting to do. It's what happens outside of the coaching session or after your conversation is over. And so if you try to solve everything, I would be in a lot of pressure in these coaching sessions. They're 55 minutes. I'd be like, I got to get this person the answers. And I got to make sure, every question they have, that we come up with a strategy and approach and we talk about all the angles. I wasn't really trusting them enough that first year to give them homework, so to speak, give them activities, ask them powerful questions, give them things so that after the session, they've got work to do. They've got stuff to do. And they would, when I started leaning into that more, they would accomplish incredible things between the coaching sessions. And then they would come back to me the next session. And I always start it with asking people, hey, how's it going? Like, what's changed since last time? What do you want to just sort of get off your chest? They call that clearing in coactive coaching. But I'd give people a chance to just sort of like get all the mental fog and crap out of their minds so they can really focus on the coaching. And I loved hearing people tell me, oh, that thing we talked about last time? Well, I started putting it into practice, or I finished that checklist, or I did that, energy audit you gave me, whatever it was related to coaching. And you won't believe what happened. And I get to hear all these cool stories of like either the insights they had, they're under less stress, they finally broke through something. And I can't make that happen in the coaching session. They make it happen themselves. It's up to me to give them the confidence and the direction in the coaching session. But, I'm not the one doing it, right? That's the biggest thing of a coach too. If you're leading people through coaching, you're not making the change. You're facilitating it. You're lifting up the person. You're broadening their view. You're challenging their mindset. But at the end of the day, they are the one who's going to do whatever it is you want them to do. So if you're leading people and you want to shift from being an expert to a coach, just remember, it's not your responsibility to feel like you have to make the change in their career or their expertise or their capabilities. You're just guiding them and you're letting them go and you're letting them get better. So let's talk about the long-term benefits of leading this way, of coaching, of looking at yourself more as a coach if you're on a team and you're leading. Some of the biggest benefits are if you begin to do this regularly. Let's say, again, you are responsible for leading 3 developers or 2 project managers or, 6 designers, whatever it is, or you're in management and you've got, 4 development managers or tech leads underneath you. If you consistently do this, you're going to create a team that feels safer to collaborate. They're going to feel less micromanaged. So they're going to be more empowered. They're going to get ultimately more done. And they're going to bother you less. I don't look at people wanting to talk to me as bothering me, but I do look at it as bothersome if the level of need, again, going back to my first point, the level of dependence people have on me is so high that they don't feel like, that I don't feel like I can even do my job. So, if you want to have your job be more peaceful and you want to have the whole team, be really innovative and really collaborative and feel safer talking to each other and feel more empowered to do stuff themselves and ultimately be more creative. I've talked about that in a lot of episodes too. Really get a chance to exercise their creativity. This is one of the huge long-term benefits of leading people through a coaching approach. And ultimately what it all gets down to is it does take more time. I'm trying to be honest here, as I always try to be in these episodes. It takes more time to coach people. It takes more time to lead people in a coaching approach. You have to think harder. When somebody comes to you with a problem, you can't just give them the answer, which is actually easier. You have to think, What is a question I can ask this person that will broaden their mindset, that will challenge assumptions they've made, that will, help them to call upon their own resources, especially if you're new to this. And I'll talk about this, learning to do this more in a second, but, it does take more time, but it takes more time up front, right? As with most things in life, exercise, a good diet, setting good expectations if you're a consultant. Yes, it takes more work at the beginning, but you get this long lasting, awesome payoff, and if you want to enjoy your job and you're in any kind of leadership position, you want to create an environment that is the least stressful. You can be the most productive with what you are great at, leading people, and see other people just enjoy the job too. If you've ever led a team and just had a lot of turnover, it's really frustrating. You start to feel like, blaming yourself. Oh, I haven't been leading people well. Well, maybe a component, not all, people can get higher job offers. A component that could be you aren't empowering people enough. And when you use this coaching kind of mindset to leading people, it's going to reduce their burnout because they're going to feel more understood, because they understand that you see them as good. You see them as growing. You see them as able to answer their own questions. When I'm seen, for example, someone's leading me and I feel like I'm seen as less than, or I feel like I'm seen as not good enough, it creates resentment, and that can create a burnout eventually. And, if you're experiencing that right now, I'm really sorry to hear it. I hope you get into a better situation. So let's talk about how you can start leading as a coach yourself. How can you start putting this stuff into practice? Even if you're, a senior engineer, let's say, and you got a new engineer that just joined the team and you're not formally leading them, but the company or the team is expecting you to kind of bring them up to speed. I don't always love that term. What can you do? Well, the first thing is start small. Don't, like I have at times, put the expectation on yourself that you got to totally transform your leadership style overnight if you've been used to just being a resource for people and answering questions and giving them everything you need. Maybe as you're working with this new person or somebody you've always led, just look for an opportunity where one of the questions that they ask you that you have the answer, you can pause a little bit longer. You can think a little bit more and think, what's a question I can ask them that shows them that maybe they haven't exhausted all the options, or there's an approach they could take that they haven't considered, or that I'd like to see them try to figure out how they can solve the answer without my input. Picking one issue a day, I think if you did that for, just a week or even 2 weeks, you're already going to start to get some practice with it, because your brain's, at least if it's like me, your brain's going to start thinking as you're interacting with people, even family, friends, in a different way. You're developing kind of a different muscle of, here's how I respond to questions being asked of me. I don't instantly respond with the answer. I sometimes respond by reflecting and thinking about that other person's best interest and how I could draw something out of them and empower them instead. The second thing to talk about in terms of starting to lead by coaching like this is there's often people that will ask me, or, when I've been on teams and people notice I lead differently and they ask me what I'm doing, there's an assumption that you have to get formal coaching training or something like that. And, if your full-time job is leadership and more of it's people leadership than it is technology, let's say, I think it would probably actually be very wise to get some formal coaching training, or, get a coach to help you with your leadership or something like that. But otherwise, you don't have to do that. You don't need formal training to start practicing this. There are all kinds of really great places you can go online to search for, 50 powerful questions to ask people, or 100 powerful questions that bring out, the best in people, or, 100 powerful coaching questions. There's so many of these out there. You'll find them no problem, because, if anything, it's hard sometimes when I call myself a coach, because coaching can have this kind of negative connotation, because today anybody can call themselves a coach. They can just say I'm a coach, put up a website, start trying to charge people with no experience in the field that they're in or really in coaching. The good news, though, is that's true for you, too. You don't have to become certified. You don't have to pay a lot of money if you want to start coaching. It's really actually low pressure if you've got a job to just start practicing it a little bit while you're doing it today. And to help you with that, let's talk just real quick about where are some areas, some common situations on real software projects where you could use coaching that you're maybe not today in a way of interacting with people and leading them. Well, the first is code reviews. If you're a programmer or a developer or an infrastructure person or an ops, you can begin to, when you're looking at other people's code and you have suggestions for them, instead of telling them how they should code it, ask them questions about the thought process that they use to decide to go the direction that maybe you think they should go a different direction. Help them to explain their reasoning. Ask them where they found those answers. Ask them what other alternatives that they looked at. You know, if they're writing code inconsistent with a pattern that the team's already agreed on, yeah, you have to point that out. But you can ask them things like, did you check this against the coding standards we've agreed on? No, I didn't. I just coded. I don't think we have a standard on that. Okay, well, what I'd like you to do is review the coding standards and see if there's anything applicable to that, because I think there might be. I don't really want to deal with that. Again, it depends on the person you're dealing with. Some people are difficult, and this is also, you're building a relationship, but code reviews are a great spot to potentially try this. Similarly, design reviews. If you are, let's say, a graphic artist or a UX designer, and you're presenting some screens or some, video storyboard scenes or, a customer journey through a website's navigation or, anything like that to other people, and you're getting feedback from them. That's a really great time where when people are asking you for, changes and things like that, instead of just making the change or agreeing to it, even if they might be reviewing it and you don't look at that as an opportunity for coaching, it can be, because you can ask people questions like, okay, I see what you want me to change there. What's your thinking behind why that's going to be a great change? Like, how's that going to help the customer? Now, you have to be careful that you're not asking it with a tone that's like, oh, how's that going to ask the customer? Obviously that's going to piss them off. You have to just be professional, be cool about it. But design reviews can be a great spot. And if you're the one doing the reviewing, you're even more empowered to. If you don't like some aspect of the design, don't just point it out. Don't just bitch about it. Ask more questions about why did they, maybe a UX designer took a different approach than you thought they would for really good reasons that are better for the user experience. And you just don't understand them. Rather than just overriding them and thinking your idea is better, explore their mindset. Try to figure out, ask some powerful questions to educate you and help them broaden their ability to explain their decisions to you. Project planning. If you're on a Scrum team, you're doing, user story discussions, you're refining the backlog. If you're doing Kanban, you're deciding which tickets should flow to which swim lanes. All those discussions are another spot that can be really great to just, ask people for their reasoning behind things. If they're struggling, well, I don't know how to get this one thing done because, this other team member's working on the same thing and there's going to be a merge conflict, whatever it is. Well, have you done any research on how people resolve this issue on other projects? No, I never thought of doing that. That might be a really good idea. Broaden people's view, right? And finally, debugging sessions. If you're pair programming, let's say, with another developer, and they're really struggling, it can be tempting when you're pairing to just delete that method, create this thing, do this, and you just start driving. And, there's an element of that in pair programming, but there also can be, hey, I've seen some other approaches for doing that before. There's a couple we could consider here, but I don't know which one's best, but I think it might be worth pausing and looking at a few of these. Where do you think we could find out more patterns about, dependency injection? Where do you think we could find out more patterns about, serverless functions, whatever it is? And again, it's not just patterns, but, if you're in the middle of a debugging session, taking the opportunity to, even if you see this as a peer and you're both pairing, You can help lead the person you're pairing by bringing the best out in them, by helping them to be more resourceful. Now, I know in mob programming, which I interviewed Woody Zuhl and talked to him about that years ago, it's a little bit different. And hey, if you're at a position in your career where you're really struggling to lead people better, you want to get better at coaching, or maybe you've never done this before and you're listening to this or watching this today and you're thinking, you know what, this would really help my career. I do have some memberships you can join. I've got a Patreon, and right here on YouTube, you can join as well. It gives you access to a free Discord server I have. Well, free if you're a member. The memberships are very low cost per month. Very low cost, but you can get in there. There's over 100 people in there. Some of them are my coaching clients. Some of them are, Patreon and YouTube members. And we're all answering all kinds of questions for each other, supporting each other, sharing stuff we're struggling with. So, if you got a new relationship, let's say with a coworker, and they're being difficult, and you need a safe space where you can talk about what you're going through, get some advice from some other people, consider joining us. I think it's a really great resource if that's something that you're up against. And if you personally feel stuck in your career, you need some help being coached, or you want to develop the ability to coach people from someone else, as you probably know by now, I'm a professional career coach. So you can check out my website. There's a link in the description, and you can read about it and apply if you think this is something that you might be interested in. Now, I do a consultation. I have to pre-qualify people. I don't coach everybody that I meet, but if I've got a spot and if you're interested, I'd love to help you. So what about you? Have you ever struggled with people that you're leading not just taking ownership, or you just feel like, man, this person nags me all the time? Have you really tried asking them these resourceful questions, or are you kind of shoving them off because you're busy and you just don't want to deal with them? Hey, I've been there. This isn't a judgment, but is that going on? Maybe this is a time to think differently. And have you ever had a manager, a peer, another leader who has been like I'm talking about, and they've made you feel more resourceful than anybody else? How did they treat you? What were some of the questions they asked that blew your mind and really challenged you and helped you grow? Let me know about it in the comments. Until next time, thanks.